Okay, well, welcome everyone back to our American Security Council Foundation webinar. Peace through Strength is the topic for today. I'm Joy Vacherbeck, Director of Operations. And Larry Sanford, or Lawrence Sanford on your screen there, is our Senior Analyst. He wrote a paper on Peace through Strength in November, and he is going to give us a little rundown of his paper, and then we'll go over some questions and anything you have to add. Larry?
Thank you, Joy. The paper was written in November and can be viewed on our website, of course. But there's Peace Through Strength in it. What prompted it was that President-elect Trump has mentioned it a number of times, but it's a phrase that's been around a long time. Of course, President Reagan was famous for advocating peace through strength during the Cold War with the Soviet Union. But it goes back to the Roman Empire and Hadrian, the emperor, back in the 200s AD, and it's fairly common sense. I suspect if you go back to the caveman, somewhere in there, they probably had the same philosophy that if you want to have peace, you better be strong and prepared. So that's basically the concept. And what had happened was in 1952, this was after the Cold War had started, the Iron Curtain had descended on Eastern Europe, and the Soviet Union was no longer allied with the West, but was in fact an enemy of the West, and it closed off Eastern Europe and taken over. And Bernard Baruch, a famous American at that time, wrote the book called Peace Through Strength. And his philosophy basically was that you have to have a strong military, you have to have a strong economy, you have to have alliances that work, and you have to be prepared. And so that concept of that name, Peace Through Strength, really got wide play in 1952 and thereafter. Goldwater used it in his presidential campaign in 66. But it really took off under the American Security Council Foundation. That at that time in the 1970s, American Security was founded in 1958, but in the 1970s, American Security was one of the pioneers in mass mailings. And they developed a terrific list. They developed a terrific board of directors and alliances. They had support from both sides of the House and Senate, both Republicans and Democrats. So they really developed an alliance of like-minded thinkers that the United States, in confronting the Soviet Union, had to have peace through strength. And strength meant a strong military. And matter of fact, our current president, Dr. Henry Fisher, received the Gold Eagle from President Reagan in the office for the work that the American Security Council did in promoting peace through strength and working with Congress to implement the programs. But then, as we all know, the Soviet Union disappeared with a whimper, and the need for peace through strength sort of fell by the wayside. And so things changed as far as American security is concerned, as far as its impact, because there was no need for peace through strength so much. And shortly after the fall of the Soviet Union, the tear down of the Berlin Wall, Fukuyama wrote a book called The End of History. And he said, basically, things have changed, and Western democracy has won the war, and there's only one superpower, and that was the United States. He wrote this in 1992. And it was a wonderful theory. Everyone loved it. The only problem is he really didn't factor in the rise of China or the rise of Islamism. And so he was refuted by Huntington. Samuel Huntington, shortly thereafter, wrote a book called Clash of Civilizations. And I'm sort of a semi-advocate for the concept of clash of civilizations, that namely the Western democracies of individual freedoms, freedom of religion, press, and free market capitalism versus the totalitarian Marxist control by government, central government. And Huntington's thesis was that these civilizations of the Western, the Eastern, mainly China, Central Europe, Russia, and then the others. But the big conflict is going to be between the Western democracy, Eastern Chinese communism and Islam. And he prescribed basically the way I see the world evolving. And he predicted that it would continue to grow, and it took over philosophies, the civilizations more than the philosophies. And the Chinese Communist Party is waging unrestricted warfare against the United States. And they're taking philosophies from Sun Tzu, who wrote The Art of War, where you have to identify your enemy, you have to identify what you can do. And the best way to win a war is not to fight it, but to subvert from within. And they're using all levers of the Chinese state, business, government, military, to subvert Western democracy. And they're also following, which is of concern to us, is they're also following an American naval officer, Alfred Mahan, who wrote books on the power of the sea. Namely, the British Empire was successful because it controlled the sea. And the Chinese are following that pattern. They're building up control of ports all over the world. And I could spend the next 15 minutes just running off all the ports, but the two ones that stick in my mind all the time are Panama, the west coast, the Pacific side of Panama Canal, the east side of Panama in the Atlantic. Both of those ports are controlled by Chinese companies. And it's going on all over the world where they're taking over ports. They just opened up a $1 billion and a half port in Peru, a big one, so it can take container ships. So they're expanding all over the world with their control of the seas. And meanwhile, the US Navy keeps on going down and the Chinese Navy keeps on getting bigger and better. Trump has campaigned on peace through strength. We'll have to wait and see how that works out, because the United States is restrained or constrained with budget problems. I mean, the massive deficits can't continue forever. And where are you going to get the money to do it right in the military? And of course, one could argue the military budget's big enough. It's the way they're spending it. I mean, to build an aircraft carrier is roughly $15 billion. The surrounding support infrastructure for a carrier task force, you get the destroyers, you get the supply ships, the submarines. You're probably talking, when you look at a picture of an aircraft carrier at sea, you're looking at $30 billion worth of equipment. And all that stuff can be taken out by drones that cost $50,000 bucks. And so we have a situation where maybe we should be spending our money on cheaper stuff. And certainly the Ukraine war, the Houthis have shown that drones can do a lot of damage. We're down there in the Red Sea shooting multi-million-dollar missiles at $50,000 Houthi drones. The numbers don't add up. So it's important that we do the peace through strength. We build up the military, but more importantly, we build it smarter and more effectively. And I personally think that the next war is not even going to be shot, including shooting. It's going to be all cyber. And the Chinese seem to be cleaning our clock between drones and cyber warfare. They've hacked into all our telecommunication systems, all their planes. If you look at a picture of a Chinese jet, it's a spitting image of an American jet, because they've copied all the designs. So what we have to do in the action with the United States is recognize that China is waging war against us, and we should take all the necessary steps to stop them. And Trump, for example, is a big fan of TikTok. TikTok is a Chinese-owned organization. It's unbelievable that we allow them to operate in America when they don't allow us to operate in their country. It shouldn't be a question of political votes. It should be a question of political security. So I'm a firm believer in peace through strength. You got to be strong, and they're going to run all over you, but we got to do it smart and effectively. So
thank you. Well, thank you, Larry. And hopefully there's a ban coming here on TikTok shortly, but we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah.
And you did walk into a lot of questions that people have asked, but thank you for going over the history of American Security Council Foundation's role in peace through strength, because that is one of our main points. Back in the 70s, as you said, there was 235 members of Congress, part of the Coalition for Peace Through Strength that the American Security Council started. There was 160 national organizations and over 180 individuals, one of which was Ronald Reagan, who would go on to thank us for our support and obviously give Dr. Fisher the award.
Yes.
So it was
We have a picture. We have a
quite the
picture of that.
legacy and bipartisan support. And as you said, it fell off, but now we see the big need for this again. And
Yeah.
like you said, the Chinese Navy is bigger than ours and overpowered, using cyber drones, and so is, for that matter, Iran and Russia. So
Yeah.
certainly is a need.
Yes.
So first question I have, Larry, is will countries feel more inclined to build a nuclear arsenal to deter countries who already possess nuclear abilities?
Well, I guess you're going to have nuclear. But to me, again, if I were an enemy of the West, I'd be developing biological weapons to wipe out the population, weaken the population, so you can take the country over and have the infrastructure left over. If you nuke a country, there isn't much left, and there aren't many infrastructures. Whereas if you take them out biologically, and it's cheaper, and how do you stop biological weapons? I don't know. And to me, that's the way I'd go. And we might have had a foretaste of this with the Wuhan virus. I'm inclined to give the Chinese the benefit of the doubt. It leaked out of the lab. But of course, they lie everything about it. They said it didn't come from the lab, but it's almost positive that it came out of a military lab in Wuhan, the virus. And after it was leaked out, they did everything they could to disrupt the West. And the classic example is they banned flights to and from Wuhan within China. They tried to isolate Wuhan because they knew there was a problem there. But they allowed international flights to come and go. Because they said, hey, we're getting polluted, we might as well pollute the rest of the world. So, I don't know what you do about Iran. I don't have an answer for that. You have a nuclear weapon. If you use it, you're going to be wiped out. So do you want to do that? And maybe the mullahs are crazy enough to go to paradise with the 72 virgins, but I don't know.
I was going to bring that point up too, is I in the past, I mean, obviously the Soviets didn't want to be wiped out by nuclear nukes the US, so it deterred that. But in the case of Iran, like you just said, that may be not the issue.
Yeah. Who knows?
So the next question, and this goes along with what you were saying, maybe there won't be another kinetic war, it will be cyber and space, but how much deterrence do you think the US should put into kinetic warfare versus cyber or space warfare?
Well, the kinetic is the nuclear weapons, the ships, the planes, and all that sort of stuff. The drones are kinetic too, but I think certainly we should be spending a lot more money and time on drone warfare. I think it was Musk or somebody I read recently suggested we don't need pilots anymore. If we do drones right, you don't need pilots because pilots are expensive, they get sick, blah, blah, blah. Whereas drones, you can control them. But then again, the problem with a drone is it's controlled from space, it's controlled electronically. And so you can have devices that can disrupt the electronic control of a drone. But then you can have drones that are self-sufficient. So there's a whole scenario, a list of things that could happen. And the other thing, as far as kinetic is concerned, I don't think we should spend another nickel for an aircraft carrier. We should be spending money on submarines. And I'm a big fan of electric diesel because they're 1/10 the cost of a nuclear. And I know they're not as effective as nuclear. They take longer, but they're pretty effective. And a few years ago, a Swedish built and run by the Swedish Navy electric diesel submarine participated with the US Navy off the coast of California. And they wiped out the fleet every time they did an exercise. So submarines are the way to go, in my opinion. And we should develop alliances. I mean, we have Korea, Japan, Germany, Sweden, who build terrific electric boats. We should make deals. The law right now is kind of against the US procuring weapon systems from other countries. I think that's a mistake. It's Western democracies against the rest. Excuse me, and we should work with them.
Yes, certainly with the buildup of China's Navy there and the concerns in the Asian Pacific, as we do have ongoing joint military training with a lot of those nations.
Yes.
And then finally, we got a question here. Okay, from Leonard, what do the members of the council think of Pete Hegseth's nomination for Secretary of DoD?
You want to answer that, Joy? I don't like to get into politics. I don't think we should get into politics. I think the best man should get into the position because it's important. Whether it's Pete Hegseth or not, who knows?
And I honestly would have to do more research on him to answer that, Leonard. So maybe we can talk offline on that one. So my last question, and you brought this up too as well, Larry, was we can build up a strong military if Trump administration wants to go there. It seems like he is willing, whether it be cyberspace, drones, whatever. But the U.S. as a nation, are we too divided with a clash of cultures and ideologies to come together to have the political will to spend on the military? Do you think that will be an issue?
Well, it certainly is an issue. We have a class of civilizations here within the United States, a political divide. I'm hoping it will heal over time. I don't know what to say. I mean, there's some people that hate the other side with a passion. I mean, we have a Senator Warren from my old home state of Massachusetts, who sort of indicated she understood why the guy Maggiano, whatever his name is, shot the healthcare executive because people can only take so much. I mean, it's that kind of thinking scares me. That people are thinking he's a hero.
Well, and Reagan himself had hurdles, to getting spending to increase the military. So I'm sure Trump's going to experience the same thing. But as you said, like people are concerned about other things as well in the country, like the inflation and immigration.
Yeah.
And spending.
Steve, I see you.
Oh. Go ahead, Steve.
I can't figure out how to raise my hand on the Zoom.
Oh, no worries.
Hey, Joy, Larry, thanks for hosting this. I really enjoyed your paper on Peace Through Strength, and I just wanted to make the comment that Peace Through Strength has been around for a long time, but the American Security Council Foundation was really instrumental back in the 80s of pushing that forward. And Joy mentioned it received bipartisan support. And I think, Larry, you hit it that, people are talking about that now. People are talking about peace through strength and what we can do. And, the world is not getting safer. And the U.S. certainly needs to take the lead on implementing that peace through strength strategy. And it's, back in the 80s, it was the nuclear piece. Now it's things like what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in the Middle East, and what's going on with China. And what I so enjoy about the American Security Council Foundation is the common sense approach that we need to get. And while both sides of the aisle will talk about peace through strength, implementing that is pretty wide. And so, I think the role that the American Security Council can play, and the people that are viewing this, is let your legislators know those common sense approaches to peace through strength. And I think both of you do a great job. American Security Council in total does a great job laying that out. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Not to
Any questions? Go ahead, Leonard.
Too much, but it's going to be a challenge doing that with Elizabeth Warren. I live in Massachusetts also.
I'm sure we are going to face challenges with that. But it does appear, and Larry and I were kind of talking offline a little of maybe Reagan's peace through strength versus what Trump's might look like. And it's hard to say, obviously, yet, but he seems to want NATO to put more money forward, which he has said before in the past, and that's understandable. He does not want to get engaged as much in wars. He mentioned Syria and us not getting engaged in that. And I think diplomatic efforts are certainly a plus first.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how Trump handles these. Okay, we have a question. The role of the Space Force will be very important as well. Oh, or a comment, I'm sorry. Would you
That is-
agree, Larry?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wrestling with how to approach a paper on the subject of Space Force because, there's all sorts of paperwork and diplomatic stuff about no militarization of space, and the Chinese and Russians, of course, are going ahead full bore. So what should we do, and how do we counter the Chinese threats? And it's a daunting task the Western civilization with America in the lead is facing from the Chinese threat. But on the other hand, the front page of the Wall Street Journal today had an article about one of the Chinese cities that at one time was the heart of Chinese coal and manufacture of steel, and it's a deserted city. It has a million and a half population, and there were 5,000 babies born last year. So China has some real internal problems, and I hope and pray every day that the Communist Party, CCP, Chinese Communist Party, disappears with a whimper, just the way the Soviet Union did. So, because their surveillance state and their ability to squash rebellion, it would be very difficult for the citizens to rise up. It has to be from within just the corruption and rot of the whole Marxist philosophy of control, centralized control. So we'll see what happens. We just have to hang in there long enough. And what if they invade Taiwan? That changes everything. So
Yes,
Chinese-
Leonard.
Well, with that, what we were saying, Larry, was the real problem is that we have the global elites assisting China's survival, financially, especially with Wall Street, et cetera. So we have to stop that. Not just tariffs, we have to stop the whole, what I think it's called, we have to start doing decoupling from China in an aggressive manner because our survival of the country or the nation depends on it.
Well, the decoupling is occurring, and China is reciprocating. You see where they're shutting off critical minerals that are used in defense and computers. So there's going to be tit for tats, and there's going to be a price to pay. But one of Trump's advisors is a guy from Sequoia. I forget his name, but he's got billions invested in TikTok. So there's all sorts of Wall Street, as you say, Leonard, involvement in China, and how do we decouple from China without having some serious money in Wall Street opposing it? Warren Buffett owns it. Warren Buffett was one of the original investors in the biggest electric vehicle company, BYD. He made billions out of that.
Is that a Chinese
It's the biggest one in the world. BYD.
I call that double entanglement.
Yeah.
And the hope initially was that China would become more democratic or more open to free enterprise before all this started, but obviously that's not happening.
No.
Yes, coupling.
Yeah, and we have all the Chinese students, we have all the fentanyl coming in, we have all the relationships. It's not going to be easy. But I think the main thing to do is to recognize the problem. And I think it's starting to get some traction in American politics that China is a real problem. So we see the China committees and so forth. So I think progress is being made.
And well, we have one final question because we have 3 minutes left here. So what about the balance between our role as a leader of the free world with people's desire to stay out of foreign wars?
And the question is?
I think that is the question. Like, so we're seeing, I mean, obviously people have seen what happened with Iraq, Afghanistan. There's probably a little bit of war.
Yeah.
Leary, Trump saying he doesn't want to go into Syria, which I can't disagree with.
And how about Ukraine? What do we do about Ukraine?
Ukraine. Yes, Zelensky was a big one calling for Trump to do peace through strength there as well. So
yeah, I mean, should we just bail out on Ukraine? I think not. I think that we should support Ukraine until. My feeling is we have another Korea on our hands. The Russians take what they have now, forget it, stop the shooting, build up a barrier, and let Ukraine go to the west, whatever left, 2/3 of Ukraine. And if you look at the demographics of Ukraine, it's 2/3 of Western Ukraine is European oriented. the 1/3 to the east, Donetsk and those places, are mostly Russian speakers. So, I mean, the country's divided ethnically and linguistically as it is. And is it worth to preserve the so-called integrity of Ukraine, to have 1,000 men and women die every day? I think not. I think not. And again, I've mentioned this before, you know, Crimea was part of Russia for hundreds of years. And so it was only assigned to Ukraine in the 1900s by Khrushchev. I forget which Russian premier did it, but I mean, historically, Crimea was always part of Russia, and for 200 years anyways. So.
Well, I would say to that too, Larry, is that I think our leadership, because at that time it was the Obama administration who had drawn a red line in the sand in Syria and didn't stick to it. So that pretty much gave Putin a kind of a green light to go ahead with Crimea.
Yeah.
And likely parts of Georgia, and now Ukraine.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of military action over the slightest thing, but there's lots of gray zone stuff we can do to make life miserable for them. So I think we should do more gray zone
And
stuff.
diplomacy, maybe tariffs, and
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
see. Well, everyone, it's 10:30. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and we are going to end the recording and send this out to our social media. So thank you once again, and join us next month. Everyone have a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Thank you, Joey.
Thank
Thank
you all.
you.
Good job.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, take
you.
care. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.